All right. Well, I guess everybody joining in now, welcome to the town hall on Georgia Tech's reopening, co-hosted with YDSA and the United Campus Workers chapter at here at Georgia Tech. I guess our panelists here are Kyle Smith, Vice President of SGA, Brett Tregoning. I don't know if I butchered that name. From UCW GT, and Dr. Alexandra Edwards, I believe a Britain postdoc, and Dr. Ian Bogost, LMC professor. I guess to start this off, I don't know if we want to start now or have a few minutes of a buffer period, but my thought is we can just start with introductions from each of you. Around 5 minutes being the rough time for that, but of course, this isn't supposed to be a super formal structure. So, I guess Dr. Bogus, would you like to start?
Sure, I can start. So I'm Ian Bogost. I am indeed on faculty at Georgia Tech in a number of places, in LMC, in digital media, in the College of Computing, in interactive computing, and then I also have courtesy appointments in Scheller and in the School of Architecture. So that's 4 colleges total. So I get around. In addition to my my work at Georgia Tech, I'm a contributing editor at The Atlantic, where I write and commission on all sorts of things: technology, design, urbanism, and other kinds of matters. Obviously, as a member of the community, I'm interested and concerned with the how and what and the sense of it all in terms of how we manage the crisis. But I'm also, interested in it from the perspective, from kind of wearing my journalism hat and thinking about not just what we're experiencing, but how it's participating in the broader context of higher education, of local and national politics, of our relationship to one another as it's mediated by technologies like the one that we're using to chat today, and a lot more. So lots of different angles that we can cover and talk about. But that's a little bit about me and where I'm coming from.
Kyle Smith, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Nikhil. I'm Kyle Smith. I use he, him pronouns, and it's so exciting to be here with you all tonight and to be alongside the esteemed panelists that you have. I'm Kyle Smith. I am a rising third-year student studying public policy at Georgia Tech, minoring in international affairs, and I have the pleasure of serving this year as SGA's undergraduate executive vice president. And so in that capacity, I've had the chance to work directly with administrators on what our approach will be for the fall, and look at what the plans are in terms of all the things that students and faculty and staff need to see to be safe. And so I still have a whole lot of deep concerns about that. I know we'll have the chance to really dive into some of those things when we get into the question and answer. But again, I'm really excited for the conversation and look forward to answering some questions.
Thanks. Dr. Edwards?
Hi. Yes, so I'm Dr. Alexandra Edwards. You could call me Alex, would be fine. I am a Marion L. Britton postdoctoral fellow in LMC, but specifically in writing and communication. So I am one of those people who taught the horrible English classes that you were forced to take when you were first year. I'm sorry, we try to make them as fun as possible. Part of my sort of positioning at Tech is that all Britton Fellows are term limited, so we're contingent faculty. We only get contracted for 3 years. I'm actually headed into my 3rd year right now, and one of the things that has been really scary from an academic perspective, from a contingent faculty perspective about this pandemic is that I was 3 days away from flying to a campus job interview when schools started shutting down and the academic job market collapsed out from underneath all of us. So it's an interesting time to be headed into what I know will 99% likely be my last year at Tech. And I got involved in trying to advocate for a safer return to campus because I am disabled, I have a disability. And when the initial sort of information came out about who Tech was going to accommodate to be able to teach remote, my disability wasn't listed on that. I was pissed about it. And so that's kind of how I ended up being in this struggle, maybe so visible, I think. I'm also excited to dig into some of these issues and get into them.
Thanks. So I guess, Brett, would you like to top it off?
Yeah, thanks, Nikhil. My name is Brett Tregoning. I'm a graduate student in the physics department. I've been involved with the union here on campus, United Campus Workers of Georgia at Georgia Tech. And I've been involved with them for about a year now. And, you know, we've been very active on this COVID stuff. So about when the summer started, we all got together and we wanted to figure out what our union strategy would be going into the summer, what kind of issues were energizing campus. And it became clear very fast that this was one of the biggest issues on campus and that should be an area of focus for us. And yeah, so that energy is translated into events like this. So it's good to see. A lot of people are fired up about the administration's response or lack of response. And yeah, I'm glad we can all get together and talk about it because there's a lot of uncertainty and I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Thanks. And just a very, very brief introduction for myself. I'm Nikhil. I'm a fourth year PhD student here. I've been a member of YDSA GT, and at least I was sort of interested in reaching out to a lot of you because there's been so much sort of different updates about the reopening and different sort of levels of the response, plus so many changes over time in the administration's response that it's sort of been confusing at times to keep track. And I saw that many of you have been very active and vocal and outspoken about these issues. And I thought it would be good to get a bunch of voices independent of the Georgia Tech administration here to kind of provide information to the student body and at least sort of guide the community in a more productive direction. So I guess starting out with our first question here, what steps do you feel the administration needs to take to guarantee a safe academic environment for the fall semester? I guess anybody can start off.
I can jump in. So what I would say, first of all, is that there need to be protections in place for students who just don't want to come back to campus, right? And so that means that there should be online accommodations for every student. And so students shouldn't have to jump through hurdles to get those accommodations. And so that's been something that we on the SGA side have been fighting for. In addition to that, we also recognize that some students and individuals may need to be on campus because that might be the best environment for them, whether it be because of housing or, you know, other specialized facilities that are only available on campus. There should be a way for students to access that in a safe way. And so I think part of that is making sure that there is ample COVID-19 testing and that there is the ability to trace cases of new infections, those sorts of things, because without those protections in place, it's not going to be very safe for students. And so I think just to kind of put a pin in that a little bit better, right now, there are no automatic contingency plans that will say that if we reach a certain threshold of cases, then we're automatically going to be going back to remote learning. And so that's something that's very troubling because we've seen the spike in cases across Georgia and across the country. And it's like, why is that something that's not been built in into the contingency plans? And so that's another thing that I think needs to be there that's lacking right now.
I'll jump in from the sort of faculty staff side of things as well. I think that we all need to be provided with a reasonable way to be able to be remote if we don't feel comfortable being on campus. Not just students, although I recognize, of course, that we have so many students who have all sorts of reasons for not wanting to be on campus, and I respect that wholeheartedly. But faculty and staff as well need to be able to say, hey, I don't want to come. And we shouldn't have to get notes from our doctors, and we shouldn't have to, and students shouldn't either, right? We should all just be able to say, hey, I'm not comfortable because it's a global pandemic. Like, I shouldn't have to prove to you that I have a medical reason. The medical reason is coronavirus. It's here, right? And there needs to, as well, I think, to be protections for particularly our staff, things like our janitorial staff, right? Who we know janitorial staff largely are people of color, right? Often women of color. And we know that people of color, particularly Black people, and I believe the chart that I looked at also said Native American, although we don't have as many community members who are Indigenous. But they're at higher risk for serious complications from coronavirus, right? And that needs to be taken into account by the administration. And I haven't heard that from anyone's mouth at all at any point, which is very frustrating.
I'll go ahead and jump in. Just to add to that, we need testing capacity, and we need a plan to execute testing on a large scale to even think about this. And this is not really something that's been communicated to us. They communicated that if you're symptomatic, you will be able to go get tests. But if you're bringing all these people back to campus, first of all, models project, and this is stuff done by Georgia Tech faculty themselves. Models project you'll get hundreds of students here possibly that are infected, and many of them could be asymptomatic. So, right away you're seeding an outbreak when the students return to campus, and then you have no way to detect that if you have no asymptomatic testing. So that's a big issue as well. And I want to echo what Dr. Edwards was saying about, students, might have a choice, or they might have a degree of choice. We'll see how that shakes out, but they might have a degree of choice in whether they go to their face-to-face interactions or not. But the campus workers on campus will not have that choice. They have to go through an arduous, invasive HR process to prove that they're at risk. And if they take care of someone who's at risk, then that's not even something that's being considered by the university. There's no policy even considering that. If they live with or have to take care of someone who is in an at-risk group. So these are protections and policies that we need to be clearly communicated to us. And even when the administration kind of, grants a concession, it's not clearly communicated because they want to make it seem like we're going to have a fully normal college experience in the fall when we're clearly not.
Yeah, so to build on all these comments a little bit, I think one of the things that we need is we need to respond to the actual situation on the ground, and some of that we know, and we've heard a little bit about some of the knowledge that we have about the pandemic and its current spread and where it might be heading in Georgia and in Atlanta, but there's a lot that we don't know, and one of the concerns that's arisen here and really at campuses all across the country is that there was an assumption in the early part of the pandemic that younger people were less affected, kids in particular, but younger adults too. When you think of the traditional aged college student, and they tend to be younger adults, not always, but often, and so there's been an assumption that students are less at risk, and the fatality rates appear to be lower, although We've also all been holed up for some months, and beyond that, we have a lot of like quite scary information that's we're still processing in the news and the scientific community about this disease that has to do with the long-term impacts of infection, even in so-called moderate cases or mild cases. And remember that those words like mild have been applied to, if you don't get hospitalized, you have a mild case. And some of those impacts could be quite severe and chronic for unknown duration. So the lack of knowledge that we have, that is the things that we're not sure about, but that might be high risk. Those factors have to be taken into account as well. We are an institution of science, and if we're not putting that foot forward now, then what is the point? We're also an institution that purports to be driven by service and connected to our community in that way, and that is another charge that we absolutely have to take seriously. And as a corollary to these comments, there's obviously a lot of politics involved in these decisions. We can't extract ourselves from the political situation because that's what we're steeped in when we deal with any social condition. But in this case, we absolutely must, in every institution in the Georgia system and elsewhere, must be able to address the particulars of their situation, their particular campus. We're located in Atlanta. We have a large array of international students at Georgia Tech that Columbus State or somebody has less of. We have students coming in from out of state at greater frequency. And that's just a few examples. There's obviously all sorts of other factors, not to mention the different kinds of employees. We've got research employees at GTRI who have a totally different relationship to the institution than faculty, staff, or students do at other kinds of universities, and so on. And so finding the purchase on our local operational management situation is absolutely necessary in order that we can make live decisions, but also correct ones for our circumstances, our particular circumstances on campus and off.
Yeah, I think those are all very great points that touch upon just kind of the range of diverse conditions that are on campus, and I guess the wide range of communities that are affected by these kinds of decisions. Yanni Lukasas, I'm probably butchering that name, actually raises kind of an interesting question here that I was actually planning to segue into in terms of what strategies for changing Georgia Tech / Board of Regents policies have, I guess, people here currently been involved with? What do you think might be effective, and what are things, I guess, we as a community can do to affect the currently planned measures and try to push the Board of Regents and various interests on campus in terms of pursuing these very sensible and, as Brett pointed out, very rigorously backed methods of guaranteeing a safe return?
I'll jump in first because I have had maybe one of the most bizarre months of my life in trying to push the Board of Regents and USG as a whole to change their GD minds. In that, one of the first things I did back in, it was I think about a month ago, I woke up to an email saying, an email from the chair of me and Ian's department or school, saying, hey, this thing we thought where you were going to get accommodated and it was going to be kind of just a formality that you like turn in a letter from your doctor or whatever, lol, JK, right? Like, in fact, you're going to have to fill out all of this paperwork and go through this whole process, and it's going to be, there's only 7 conditions that you're allowed to have that will qualify, et cetera. And I did like the thing that I instinctively do, which is I just got mad about it on Twitter. I didn't even think of it necessarily as strategy. Sorry, my cat is being chaotic. I didn't even necessarily think of it strategy as much as I thought, like, I'm mad and I want to tell people that I'm mad about this, right? That Twitter thread that I put together generated a lot more interest than I ever realized that it would. In part, I think because, as Ian says, these are issues that campuses across the country are dealing with, but also in part because I had acquired this slideshow, this slide deck that was presented to the chairs. And given that we're all public employees here for the state of Georgia and our email is subject to FOIA and open records request anyways, I thought, well, fuck it, I'll put it on Twitter along with it. And it was some of the only like transparent information I think a lot of people had gotten. So it really captivated their attention. But what came after that, I think, was the really crucial part. I got attention that I didn't necessarily anticipate I was going to get. And I found immediately that journalists wanted to talk to me about this because it's a huge story. And I said yes to most of the requests that I got, although I vetted reporters pretty carefully, which is how I like ended up being in the New York Times. Totally bizarre, random experience I didn't expect to happen. But that level of media attention, then when Georgia Tech faculty put together the letter signed as a sort of petition saying like, Cabrera needs to be in charge of the decisions here, and these are the things that we want. The ball was already rolling, right? It had already been a national news story, and Georgia Tech had already been part of that national conversation. And so we got picked up by, that letter got picked up by places like CNN. And that public pressure, Georgia Tech being fucking embarrassed that they were national news for not even requiring masks, is the thing that really, I think, was a tipping point or a leverage point on USG and forced USG to change their mind about the masks specifically. And the last thing I'll say on this point then is that also United Campus Workers of Georgia have been doing a really great escalation campaign, trying to get more and more attention to this issue. And a small group of us, Yanni included actually, went to the business office of the chair of the Board of Regents on Monday to present our demand from the union petition that over 10,000 people have signed. The second part of that first demand, the first demand was masks have to be required. Second part of that demand was masks have to be provided. We went on Monday, raised some hell. On Thursday, today, just like an hour ago, the news broke that USG, in fact, has been acquiring their own PPE to distribute to schools around the state, on top of what the institutions are putting together. So I think in terms of what's been successful so far, getting attention that is embarrassing, and raising hell and making yourself a problem, putting yourself in people's way and saying, no, you have to take us seriously on this.
Yeah, that's definitely a big thing. Making noise, creating public pressure, working together with other people to do that stuff. Like, your original thread, Dr. Edwards, I saw it, and I'm sure a lot of other people in the community saw it and got fired up, and that energy was there, right? And so we need to keep building that energy and keep people engaged on this issue. And the win that we got with the masks that you mentioned, which happened after this whole thing became a national story, even Dr. Cabrera in a town hall admitted that it was the pressure from the letters of all these and petitions that all these people have been signing that resulted in that change. So, even GT administrators admit that is what it takes to create change in the system. It's not them, it is us, and we have to oppose the decision makers and put pressure on them to make the right decisions, because otherwise they have no incentive to.
Kyle, you have a somewhat unique perspective here because of your work within SGA. So I guess sort of more specifically directing that question to you, I guess in sort of a lot of your direct interactions with the administration, what do you feel is part of their guiding process here, and how can we as a community best influence that process?
Yes, I would say that, echoing the points that have already been made, public pressure works. And unfortunately, I think that's really the only way that we're going to see change during this entire process. SGA has been very clear since we began our discussions, I guess, back in March or so when we actually got elected and transitioned over. And it seems that so many of the plans have just not necessarily been thoroughly thought through, or that Georgia Tech doesn't have the decision-making power, which we always hear time and time again. And so we then follow that up with, okay, well then what are you asking for from USG? Because certainly you should go in with the requests and asks. And so we haven't really been satisfied. I personally haven't been satisfied. And so that's why we've continued to try and do things like our petition, to get the online option, but we've also done other sort of, I guess, online organizing with our videos. We put out videos, I guess it was last week or maybe the week before, trying to call on USG and Georgia Tech to actually make meaningful reforms when it comes to things like tuition and fees, because we have to also remember in this conversation, in the middle of this pandemic, we also have folks, nearly 51 million Americans who were applying for unemployment claims. And we know that eviction moratoria will be expiring. If they haven't already expired, they'll be expiring at the end of this month. And so what does that mean for low-income students and their families? How are they going to be able to afford those tuition and fees? And so we've been asking for these things for quite some time now. And I think at this point, one of the best things that we can do as individuals, and taking off my SGA hat and speaking in my personal capacity, I really want to see us really contact media, the way that Dr. Edwards was mentioning, but also to contact civil rights organizations, because we know that COVID-19 has had a disparate impact on people of color. We know that we should not be returning because we see the data, and the conditions now are worse than they were when we actually went online back in March. And so it just seems to be very clear and fundamental that we shouldn't be treating these small but important wins. The mask was a win that we got from the public pressure, but we shouldn't let USG or Georgia Tech off the hook, because certainly that's drops in the bucket compared to the vast things that we really need to see if we're going to actually be safe and protected. So I think that contacting the civil rights organizations, keeping up the public pressure, are things that we're going to have to do to really make sure that we're holding everybody who is making these decisions accountable.
I guess, Dr. Bogost, do you have anything perhaps to add?
Yeah, let me add. I'll add something here. Yanni asked what has been effective, and of the efforts I've been involved in, I think some of the most effective strategies have been those that built coalitions across the state with other campuses. The political situation that we find ourselves in, not just in this moment, but going back years and indeed decades with the state and with the state system, with the university system of Georgia, Georgia Tech is often perceived as thinking of itself as exceptional, of trying to bend or the rules or do things on its own. On top of that, the regents of the state government in general are often populated by bulldogs rather than yellow jackets, and so efforts that draw together multiple campuses, multiple constituencies that have not necessarily exactly the same concerns, although the mask demand was an example of something that we were all after, but that recognize that we need different things at different institutions and the ability to carry those decisions out locally to the extent that that's possible. So. So one of the things I did early on at the end of June was I did a piece for the Atlantic about the kind of key to a discovery that a colleague at UGA had made about Georgia and Georgia Tech being the only two of the top 20 public institutions by ranking, by the U.S. News ranking, that were not already requiring masks. That was when we were still working on the masks a problem. And that was terrifically embarrassing, but it was also a piece of data that had been relatively hidden inside of our community's knowledge base. So getting that out there, and I sort of spun it into a piece about the perverse incentives that drive college management in general, which is a way of of expanding that local circumstance into something that that has national interest. But some of the other things that I've been involved in, like helping spread that Georgia Tech faculty letter to other campuses. That was important. From what I understand, when it was just Georgia Tech in the news, it was effective, but was also having political cost. And so getting more institutions to adapt their own, which they did, and they can kind of adjusted it to their particular needs. We saw that at a number of institutions. I don't have them in front of me. I was also involved in putting together, kind of facilitating a letter that the Regents professors, about 58 of the 90 some Regents professors, which is the highest rank that the system awards, and that has the name of the Regents in the title, about principally about autonomy and local decision making, which we put in the AJC. So I think I don't know exactly where that process ends, and we can go back to local issues, but I remain extremely concerned about the system in general and its operation, the sort of secret or unknown demands or threats that might or might not be bearing down on the presidents and the rest of us as a result of that. And so, to my mind, anything that we can do to come at this, really what's a political problem in a way, as a collective across the system, is effective, without, of course, shirking the local concerns that we also have to address on our campus.